Hey everyone, Andrew here, and today I'm going to be talking about a television show. Today I'm going to be talking about a spin-off to one of my favorite shows of all time. It was a show from 1989. It is called Quantum Leap. Now, Quantum Leap just had a reboot, sequel, spin-off show also called Quantum Leap, which just came out this last year, and I just got through the season finale for that show. And I felt it a good idea to take a look at the new show, compare it to the original, and what my thoughts and overall on it. Because here's the thing, the original Quantum Leap is honestly my favorite show of all time. I'm a very open person when it comes to things like this. I'm not going to hate something just because it's not exactly what I wanted, which, you know, if I was, because I'd wanted a reboot to Quantum Leap for a while. Like, ideally, we would have gotten Sam and Al back, but, after Dean Stockwell passed, it was very unlikely that that was ever going to happen. My idea with, if I was ever going to pitch, like, the idea of Quantum Leap is I wanted it to be Sam's son leaping back trying to find his father, and he would have a robotic projection AI with him. So it would be like a cuff that was traveled with him that would produce a person that he could see. This TV show definitely went a bit more with the traditional Quantum Leap idea, where it is just a person leaping through time and he has a companion who is a hologram who only he can see. But the reboot has some stuff to talk about, so I'm going to be taking a look at the plot of the old show, plot of the new show, compare them, what I think works from the new show, what I think needs to be improved on, what I think didn't work at all, and just my overall thoughts on the new version of this show. So, yeah, just to set you up, if you've not seen the original Quantum Leap, which, go watch it, it's freaking amazing. It was an NBC show, started in 1989, stars Scott Bakula as Sam Beckett, a time traveler.
Theorizing that one could time travel within his own lifetime, Dr. Sam Beckett stepped into the Quantum Leap accelerator and vanished.
Who leaps into the bodies of people throughout his lifespan. So instead of, physically traveling into the 1950s via a machine, like Back to the Future, he leaps into the body of someone in the 1950s.
He awoke to find himself trapped in the past, facing mirror images that were not his own, and driven by an unknown force to change history for the better.
A man, woman, one time he was a chimpanzee. It's really creative and really interesting way of doing it. And he is helped by Al Calavice, played by Dean Stockwell, who is a hologram who basically is there to guide Sam and let him know what's going on and what they do.
His only guide on this journey is Al, an observer from his own time, who appears in the form of a hologram that only Sam can see and hear.
And every time he leaps into a body, he's there to fix something. Something went wrong in past, and Sam needs to set the timeline correct in order to leap onward. And his hope is to eventually be able to make enough jumps that he gets to go home.
So Dr. Beckett finds himself leaping from life to life, striving to put right what once went wrong, and hoping each time that his next leap will be the leap home.
And to me, this is still, legitimately one of the coolest concept shows ever made. It's just so creative and so interesting. Every episode has an interesting element to it, or an interesting dynamic. Sometimes Sam comes in as a woman, sometimes he's a boxer, sometimes he's a wrestler. He gets this huge, wide range of things, and every time it's something somewhat interesting, or somewhat compelling, or somewhat odd. Quantum Leap is a nearly perfect show. It's just such a good concept, such great characters, what they did with the budget they had and all that stuff. You really feel the heart and the feeling and the love and the creativity of this series. It is nearly perfect. Cut to the current show, which is a sequel reboot kind of thing. Like, it takes place 30 years after the original Quantum Leap program, when Sam Beckett stepped in the Quantum Leap accelerator and vanished in time, is what they say. The math is a little weird because Sam leapt in the late 90s, like 1998, 1999 time frame, as far as I remember, and the current show takes place in 2022. Like, they flat out state what year it is when it takes place, so it's not 30 years. Like, it doesn't make sense for that. He would have had, if he leapt in 93, you would be right, but no, he did not leap in 1993. And basically, the original Quantum Leap program was shut down. Sam disappeared. No one knows where in time he even is. And years later, the program is restarted up by a commander named Herbert Magic Williams. And he's restarted the program and gotten a new quantum physicist named Ben Song.
Your name is Dr. Ben Song. You're from the year 2022. You were the lead physicist on a top-secret project called Quantum Leap.
To be working on developing it so that they can send someone through time, but with more control and being able to bring them back into the present. They were still a good little bit of ways from having that fully figured out and mapped out when, for no apparent reason, Ben Song stepped in the Quantum Leap accelerator without telling anyone and then vanished into time.
Anything you can imagine.
And one of the problems with quantum leaping is that when you do that and you travel, you immediately gain amnesia, and you don't know who you are or what you're doing or why these things happened. So his hologram projector, who is named Addison, is like, wait, what the hell? You were not supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be the leaper. You are supposed to be my hologram person. Why did you do this? And he's like, I don't even know who you are.
Ben! We've been trying to find you for hours.
Do I know you?
You don't remember me.
I don't remember anything.
What the hell are you doing? Get the van! I'm a hologram from the future. We gotta go now! I'll explain everything later. Just get in the van.
So, through the course of the season, we find out that Ben Song and Addison are engaged and are together.
I'm Addison Augustine. We work together.
Now the two of them have to work together to figure out why he leaped, what is going on, and also what they have to do to help the universe so he can leap forward to keep moving along to figure out what his overall goal is. And you find out that the entire reason that he leapt is to save her. That there is this evil leaper who is traveling through and trying to reset the timeline in a different way because people of power want to have more control over time. And conceptually, this is basically the exact same show. It is just, smart guy finding himself in odd situations that he was uncomfortable with, trying to do the right thing and help people so that he can eventually make his way home. Execution-wise, it is not quite the same. Which, to be fair, it wasn't going to be. It's 30 plus years since the original show aired, and television has changed dramatically in that time. And definitely not, this one definitely clearly has a much bigger budget and production quality to it. It is definitely a bit more jarring than the original. The original has this really slow build up into figuring out what the plot is and what's going on and all that, this and the other. Like, Sam leaps into someone and doesn't really know why things feel weird or what he's doing, and you just kind of focus on him for a while, whereas this one you get the whole preamble of explaining who Ben is and who is Addison and that they're engaged and then leaping and not remembering, and it's a little bit more cluttered. Takes a little bit harder to wrap your brain around. So let's talk about a couple some strengths that this new version of the show has. The first off is that it has a much bigger budget than the original show did. Because the original show was made back in 1989, which, shows like this got very low budget in the early 90s. Like, they do an amazing job with the budget they had in 1989. Like, that show is beautifully made. But it's like, it has a harder time, like, depicting the time eras, and, can't use the pop music from those eras very often, so it becomes a very, harder to pin, you don't necessarily know immediately when he leaps into a body what time period this is, this and the other. Whereas this show, they have the budget, they can do bigger things, make it more obvious, add in actual, pop music of the time, which is a help and a curse because they were a little bit over-reliant on the pop music of the time for the first few episodes. They calmed down about 5 or 6 episodes in, but it was really rough the first few for that. The cast in this one is actually pretty good. I definitely have to say I prefer the original leads to the new leads, but the new leads are pretty good. You have Raymond Lee as Ben Song and Caitlin Bassett as Addison Augustine, and they have really good chemistry with each other. You can tell that they were a couple in the show and that they have this emotional, deep connection that works extremely well.
Changing history for the better. No matter what happens, Ben, look out! I am going to be with you every step of the way until we get you home.
And, like, Addison is just a great character overall. You get a really good range of her personality and her feelings and her thoughts in this. Ben, I'm going to have to talk about in the mixed bag section a little bit. But it does tie into the original really well. Like, Dr. Sam Beckett is a real character. He's brought up multiple times. The original project is brought up multiple times. Al is brought up, and we even meet Al's daughter, who is helping Ben do the time travel, but she's been working off the grid and doesn't want anyone from the Quantum Leap project to know what's going on. Also, like, the guy who's running Quantum Leap, Herbert Magic Williams, actually is someone that Sam leaped into. There was a really great episode of the original series where Sam leaps into this African-American soldier during Vietnam to save his brother and their troop, and the person he leapt into is Magic. And now, like, Magic was working in the government and stumbled upon this file for the program and saw Sam, and it just, like, connected, because he didn't remember the events of that, but he remembered something, and that seeing Sam's face filled in those blanks, and he figured everything out and decided to restart the program because it did such good for him in his life, and he wants to keep, continue that onwards. And, like, that was, like, legitimately, that was the point that saved this show for me, was when they pointed that out and figured that out. Like, because the first few episodes, I was very with. Like, I didn't hate it, but it was, like, it was rough, and it was definitely missing something. But that reveal and tying it into the original is one of the great things about the show. And hopefully we get to do more with that, but we will have to see. One of the things I did like this is they took one of the weaker parts of the original and actually delved into it and expanded on it more than we were ever able to in the original show. Because in the original show, we never really got to meet the Quantum Leap team and what they were doing and how they were helping Sam with his leaps. We saw Al, and we saw his little communicator pad thing, and occasionally you would hear names of characters, like you would hear about the computer Ziggy, or you would hear about Gushy, who is, like, legitimately, I forget his name all the time. Like, the only thing I remember is that his character had halitosis and had really bad breath, was his character-defining trait. And then, there's this Project Psychiatrist, and you had programmers, but these are all just, like, names that you would hear in passing, you almost never really got to saw, except for very specific episodes. And that was always, like, one of the things with the show, is, like, you really wanted to know more about it, and more about that. Which, understandably for the show, there was reasons that they didn't want to do that. For the starters, is that it was set in the future, and they had ideas of what the future would look like, but they were dramatically different from the present. And that's one of the weird things with the show, is, like, the show was made in '89. It's set in, like, 1999. It's like, it's not very far in the future, and yet they are depicting the few times that we do see the future, it is dramatically different than the present. They were all in neon colors, and their clothes glowed, and it was all futuristic in style, and it's like, did you really think we were going to jump that far in styles in like 10, 15 years? Like, and then you get to the new show, and it's just today. It's just normal, and it's like, okay, what about that time period that Sam was from with all those weird things? And my justification would be that Sam did enough changes in the past that that entire style and frame thing never happened. Butterfly effect. And that was one of the things that I like, that if you really could delve into the present of the Quantum Leap program, that you could really dive into and do some interesting stuff with. Sadly, with this show, they haven't done a lot of that with. They did with the Quantum Leap books based off the original series, which I've read a couple of them. Some of them are actually really interesting, really good. There was one of them that did this concept that I really particularly liked, where it's like every time Al would step out of the imaging chamber, which is how he projected himself to be seen by Sam, he would stop and ask the computer Ziggy for an update, and they would tell him everything that was going on with the people in Project Quantum Leap. And you find out that he has to do that every single time he steps out of the imaging chamber, because he never knows if the people that he knew are even going to be there. He has a girlfriend, but she might not be his girlfriend. She might be his wife. She might be his ex. She might be married to somebody else and have never dated him. He doesn't know these details, so he has to get updated every single time, because the timeline changes anytime Sam does anything. And that was such an interesting concept in the book, and I'm sad they did not choose to do any of that with the current show. I get that that would be a pain in the butt to have things constantly, little things changing in every single episode, but that is something that would have been really interesting to dive into and talk about more. So yeah, we get to meet a whole new cast of characters in this one that have different roles and different things that they do as part of Quantum Leap. You meet the security officer, you meet the chief architect who created and updated Ziggy to be more useful, you know, and you get like a lot more of how they figure out information and work to help out. One of the episodes towards the end of the season, they had to turn off the computer because they didn't think it was trustworthy. So they were having to try to figure out how to fix the situation, like going through like old library posts and all of these random things, trying to figure out the information. We're having an extremely difficult time with it. But it was really interesting to see that side of it, whereas like in the original show, it would have just been Sam going, "Where's Al? I need help," and that would be the extent of what we saw. But yeah, so that was one of the things that they dived into that I felt was actually a pretty good choice.
Can you hear me?
Why did he leap? Find out what he's there to do and bring him home.
As for some of the lesser things in the show, I unfortunately do have to talk a little bit about Raymond Lee as Ben Song. Now, Raymond Lee is a pretty good actor. He doesn't do a horrible job in this performance in any way. It is just how dramatically a different performance he gives compared to the original played by Scott Bakula. And I get it's different characters, and it's a different tone, and it's a different thing. But there's something about the way Scott played Sam in the original. Every single time that he leaped, he had this air of intrigue and interest and caring, and it's like he got invested into every leap. And yes, his goals were, you know, to solve the problem and leap so he could possibly get home, but you always felt that he cared more about helping these people than necessarily about leaping home. And he always had that warmth and that heart to it. And they try to do that with Ben, and he gets better at it as the series goes on. But really early on, especially like the second through the sixth episode, he has this very much an air of, I'm already over this. Like, he's just like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to leap. I don't want to help people. I just want to go home.
Obviously, I time travel into other people, so beam me up.
It's not that simple.
And it takes a bit of the wind out of the sails, because, like, with Sam Beckett, Sam also really wanted to go home. That was his overarching goal. But he also enjoyed the journey, and you could tell that he cared about everything that he leapt into, and there was always this air of fun and mystery and intrigue, and he always made it, like, you wanted to adventure with Sam forever. And it's like you hoped that he would get home, but you were always going to be with him there on the journey. Whereas Ben, it's a little bit like, stop whining and just help out a little bit. Like, it gets a little more melodramatic in this version than I particularly care for. And I don't want to put that all on Raymond Lee. A lot of that is the writing, and they just really kind of ham up the drama a little bit. And, yeah. He has good motives and good reasons for being behind it, but he definitely has a somewhat of an air of I'm only doing this to fulfill my own goals to an extent. Like, he does get to the point where he actually is more about trying to help people and trying to make things better, and he gets better as a character as the season progressed, but he was definitely the weakest part of the first couple episodes for me. But yeah, if you cannot tell from the fact that Dr. Sam Beckett has been missing for 30 years in this version of the show, he didn't get to go home. I mentioned earlier one of the weaknesses of the original show was that you didn't get to see much of the future team. The biggest weakness of the original show is its finale. Like, the final episode is great, but the last 2 minutes of it is just a black screen with text that's like, Sam never made it home. And it's like, what? No, it has the potential to be like the worst ending ever because it's just so blunt and hard and rough. I've always been able to come to terms with it and justify it and understand it because they made it very clear, especially in that final episode, that the person controlling the leaps is Sam. That Sam can go home anytime he wants. He just has to want it more than he wants to help people. The fact that he continues to choose others, to help others, to make the world a better place, really fits and works with that character and really makes you understand and sympathize with him. It's like he's very much this almost like folklore hero kind of character by the end, where it's like he's leaping from time to time, helping people for the sake of helping people, and not thinking or worrying about his own happiness in that regard. And I really like that idea. I think that's a really interesting way to do it. I wish they'd been able to word it that way better than, just Sam never made it home. But yeah, they did not intend to be canceled after 5 seasons. There was supposed to be a 6th season, and there's a whole separate finale that was filmed that, has a really interesting story. And Allison Pregler actually did a whole video that was talking about the ending of Quantum Leap and what the real other ending was and how this pictures and this stuff showed up. And yeah, I'll include that in a link. It's really interesting if you're a fan of the show to look into some of her stuff about that. One of the other weaknesses with the show is they were very abundantly reliant on the pop music from the time frames in the very first few episodes. Like, it would go straight from one 80s pop song to another 80s pop song that doesn't necessarily match the scene that it's supposed to be in, but we have to make it clear that this is the 80s. I brought up Al's daughter in this, who's helping out Ben. Her character is just kind of off for me. Like, she was working with Ben to save the timeline, to save everything, and she knows that someone within the Quantum Leap project is not trustworthy. But she just, refuses to talk to anyone or give any type of advice, or she's just so antagonistic that you think there's this bigger deal reason behind it, like she's actually the villain or something, and it's like, who knows if that'll be the case in later seasons, but it was just more like she was just there to be a pain in the butt and not tell us the things that she knows. It's missing a bit of the heart that the original had. Like, it starts to get close. Like, as the series goes on, you start to really feel that connection between Ben and Addison, but it doesn't really match the immediate chemistry that Sam and Al had from the original. The show also had a smidge over-reliance on its overarching plot, where it's like trying to figure out what Ben was doing and why he was doing this and why he started this leap and what he was trying to stop for the entire season, that certain episodes just end up a little bit lost in that, where it's just that becomes the focus and the drive and this, that, and the other. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's definitely, it's a thing that we do now into TV, which would back in the 80s, they didn't really do overarching plots that way because they didn't think of shows like that. Like, you couldn't even really do two-part episodes back during Quantum Leap's time frame because they were always worried, like, what if they miss the first episode? They will be lost and confused. We can't do that. You know, so it's like having an overarching start plot is definitely a strength for this one to an extent. It just becomes the overwhelming presence for a lot of this. And, like, overall, I think the show has its merits. I don't think it's a bad show. I think it's missing some of the heart. If this show ended the same way the original did, it would be extremely more disappointing for this one than the other one, because all this character wants to do is get home. Like, Sam wanted to help people and get home. Ben mostly wants to get home. Like, he will help people because he's a good person and a good character, but his desire to get home is his overwhelming goal. I would also say one of the things that makes me kind of disappointed with this new show is, while it does tie into the original, we aren't going to get a lot of the original in this. Like, you get to meet characters and stuff from this, but we aren't going to get to meet Al because, unfortunately, you know, rest in peace, Dean Stockwell is no longer with us. And they wanted Scott Bakula to come back as Sam for any point, and Scott Bakula just said no. I don't know. Like, it's just kind of like, it's such a good thing that could happen, and I hope, because the first season did well enough, that we will, you know, get to the point that, you know, they might convince him to come back for an episode. Like, even if he only shows up for like an episode or a quick cameo, I would be okay with that. Like, I'm worried if they do bring in Sam's character at all, they're going to have it be a completely different actor, and that's the body he's leapt into, and we never see Sam revealed underneath. Like, honestly, I would settle if Sam showed up at the end of the series as a bartender who gave Ben advice, much like a bartender that was basically God gave Sam advice and helped him figure out what he was supposed to do. Like, that would be a really great use of that cameo and way to bring that character in. But I worry that we will never get that, and if we don't get that, then that is a huge missed opportunity for this series. Because if you're going to be a spin-off, if you're going to constantly reference the original Quantum Leap and the original program and the original project, then there has to be real connection or real payoff to that. Like, overall, the Metacritic score for this is like a 55 out of 100 or 5.3 out of 10, and I would say that's a little low, but not. It doesn't deserve much higher. I would honestly give it 3.5 out of 5. Like, it gets better as it goes, but like those first few episodes are pretty low. I think the later episodes get better. I am interested to see what they do with the rest of the series. I will say one of the things that drove me nuts is you got to the end of this season, and they end on a cliffhanger of, does he or does he not make the leap back home? And then immediately 2 seconds later they're showing a preview for the next season, and the first line in the new preview is, it's like, why didn't I make the leap home? I'm like, wow, great way to ruin the suspense of the cliffhanger you tried to end on.
This can't be happening. I was supposed to leave home.
Why in the hell did you choose to end on this weird cliffhanger if you're automatically going to tell me he doesn't make it home? You could have just shown it not working and been like, where is he? And ended on that note instead. But all of us knew he wasn't going to make it home. Like, you could do a version of Quantum Leap where he does get to go home and then leaps and then goes back and then leaps and goes back, but that's not nearly as interesting or compelling. So, like, overall, I think the show is good. I don't think it's amazing, and I don't think it's the perfection that the original was. I do think it has potential, and I hope that it only gets better from here. It's not impossible, but it is... Who knows? I'm worried that the Ben character is going to become more and more depressed and less enthusiastic about doing these leaps as the series goes on. And he's already was pretty over it by episode 2. So yeah. I'm a little worried about that, but I think the show still has potential, but that is just my opinion. What do you all think? Have you seen the new show? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Is there something about it that you wish they'd done differently? Did you see the original? What's your thoughts on that? Let me know in the comments below. Like, I'm not going to do this for, like, every season of this. Maybe when the show ends, I will do an overall comparison between the two. But for now, my thoughts on the 2022 Quantum Leap are, it's good. It could be great. I don't think it's going to be fantastic. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. Happy watching. Happy reading. I will see you all next time. Bye.